A father abandons his family after seeing his newborn's unexpected skin color, shattering hearts and trust. But when a buried secret surfaces, the truth rewrites everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and identity. It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. Rachel had just given birth to her first child, a beautiful baby boy named Isaac. The hospital room was filled with flowers, congratulatory cards, and the soft hum of lullabies playing from her phone. She sat on the bed, her face glowing with the pure joy of motherhood. She couldn't wait for her husband, Daniel, to meet their son. The door opened, and Daniel stepped in, his face lit up with excitement. "Let me see him," he said eagerly, rushing to Rachel's side. She handed the baby over carefully, watching as Daniel's expression softened. But then, just as quickly as the warmth appeared, it vanished. Daniel froze. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the baby, his smile fading. His eyes scanned Isaac's face, his tiny hands, and finally, his skin. It wasn't the pale complexion Daniel had expected. It was darker, noticeably darker. "What is this?" Daniel's voice was low, almost a whisper. The joy in the room evaporated in an instant. Rachel frowned, confused. "What do you mean? What is this? He's our baby, Daniel." Daniel looked up at her, his face now a mix of shock and suspicion. "Rachel, his skin, it's not mine. This doesn't make sense." Rachel's heart sank. She felt the weight of his words, the unspoken accusation hanging between them. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling, "what are you saying?" Daniel handed Isaac back to her as if holding him burned his hands. He took a step back, shaking his head. "I'm saying this can't be my son." Rachel stared at him, stunned. "How could you even think that?" she asked, clutching Isaac protectively. "You know I'd never betray you." "I don't know anything anymore," Daniel snapped, his voice rising. "You expect me to ignore this? Look at him, Rachel. He doesn't look like me, not even close." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes. This wasn't the man she married, the man who had promised to love her unconditionally. "He's your son, Daniel," she whispered. "You're just scared. Please don't do this." But Daniel wasn't listening. His mind raced, his thoughts consumed by doubt and fear. To him, the evidence was clear, and it shattered everything he thought he knew about his wife, his marriage, and now his family. Without another word, Daniel turned and stormed out of the room, leaving Rachel alone with their newborn. The silence he left behind was deafening. The following days were a blur of heartbreak and confusion. Daniel barely came to the hospital, avoiding Rachel and the baby altogether. When he did visit, he kept his distance, his eyes filled with doubt instead of love. Rachel tried to reason with him, to assure him that Isaac was his son, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. At home, things only got worse. Daniel's absence grew longer, his once loving demeanor replaced with cold detachment. Whispers began to circulate among friends and family, feeding his paranoia. "Are you sure the baby's his?" one old friend had asked during a casual conversation. The question stayed with Daniel, festering like a wound. Rachel's world felt like it was crumbling around her. The life she had built with Daniel, the love they had shared, was now overshadowed by his doubt and accusations. And yet, through it all, she clung to Isaac, her one source of hope. Late one night, after weeks of tension, Daniel finally spoke the words Rachel had been dreading. "I can't do this anymore," he said, standing in the doorway with a packed bag in his hand. "I need to know the truth." Rachel's voice cracked as she begged him to stay. "You're leaving us? Over this?" "I don't know what else to do," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't live like this, Rachel. I can't look at him and not wonder." And just like that, Daniel walked out the door, leaving Rachel to pick up the pieces of their broken family. Rachel was left to navigate the fallout alone, her heart aching for both herself and her son. But what neither of them realized was that the truth, The unimaginable truth was waiting to be uncovered. And when it came to light, it would change everything. Rachel sat alone in the nursery, rocking Isaac gently in her arms. The soft glow of the nightlight cast long shadows on the walls, creating a cocoon of quiet that contrasted starkly with the turmoil in her heart. Isaac's innocent eyes blinked up at her, unaware of the storm that had engulfed their lives. "How could he leave us?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she kissed Isaac's tiny forehead. "You deserve better, my sweet boy." Despite her heartbreak, Rachel was determined to uncover the truth. She knew Isaac was Daniel's son. There was no doubt in her mind. But she also knew that proving it was the only way to bring Daniel back and restore their fractured family. The next morning, Rachel called a trusted friend, Dr. Evelyn Carter, a geneticist and family friend. She explained the situation, her voice trembling with both hope and desperation. "I need a paternity test," Rachel said firmly, gripping the phone. "I need to prove to Daniel that Isaac is his." Dr. Carter sighed on the other end of the line. "Rachel, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Of course I'll help. Come by the clinic tomorrow." Rachel felt a small spark of hope for the first time in weeks. If this test could confirm what she already knew, maybe Daniel would finally come home. The clinic was quiet when Rachel arrived with Isaac the next day. Dr. Carter greeted her with a warm hug, her face lined with concern. "This will be straightforward, Doctor," Carter explained, gently swabbing Isaac's cheek. "We'll compare his DNA to Daniel's. It'll take a few days to get the results." Rachel nodded, her resolve firm. "Thank you, Evelyn. I just want this nightmare to be over." As Rachel left the clinic, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to her. What if something went wrong? What if the test didn't give Daniel the closure he needed? She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on her love for Isaac and her determination to fight for their family. Meanwhile, Daniel was grappling with his own demons. He had moved into a small apartment across town, isolating himself from friends and family. His mind was a battleground of conflicting emotions, anger, guilt, and a deep sense of loss. Late one night, as he scrolled through photos of his and Rachel's wedding day, he found himself questioning everything. The love in her eyes that day had been undeniable. Could he have been wrong? Could his doubts have blinded him to the truth? Daniel's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was his older sister Caroline, a no-nonsense woman who had always been his moral compass. "What are you doing, Daniel?" she demanded, stepping into the apartment. "You walked out on your wife and son. Do you even realize what you've done?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand, Caroline. The baby, he doesn't look like me. How could I stay when I don't even know if he's mine?" Caroline's eyes flashed with anger. "Do you hear yourself? Rachel has been nothing but loyal to you, and you threw it all away because of your own insecurities. Do you even know how much damage you've caused?" Daniel looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Caroline stepped closer, her voice softening. "Then find out. But don't make your son pay for your doubts. He didn't ask for any of this." Back at home, Rachel tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Isaac's sake. She sang to him, played with him, and whispered promises of a brighter future. But each night, as she lay in bed, the silence reminded her of Daniel's absence and the hole it had left in her heart. 3 days later, Rachel's phone buzzed with a call from Dr. Carter. Her hands trembled as she answered. "Rachel," Dr. Carter said gently, "the results are in. Can you come to the clinic?" Rachel's heart pounded as she gathered Isaac and rushed to the clinic. She felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. The truth was finally within reach. Dr. Carter met her in the office, holding an envelope with the results. "Rachel, the test confirms what you've believed all along. Daniel is Isaac's father. Rachel exhaled sharply, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. But before she could leave, Dr. Carter hesitated. "There's something else, Rachel." Rachel froze, her heart sinking. "What is it?" Dr. Carter took a deep breath. "The test revealed something unusual about Isaac's DNA. It's not a matter of paternity, but it's significant. I think you and Daniel need to see this together." Rachel stared at Dr. Carter, her mind racing. "What do you mean by unusual?" she asked, clutching Isaac protectively. Dr. Carter hesitated, her professionalism battling with personal concern. "Rachel, I'd prefer to explain this with both you and Daniel present. It's important, and I think he deserves to be here for this." Rachel's heart clenched. The idea of facing Daniel again filled her with dread, but she knew this wasn't just about her. It was about Isaac and whatever truth Dr. Carter had uncovered. "All right," Rachel said softly. "I'll call him." When Rachel called Daniel later that day, he hesitated. Her voice, once so familiar and warm, now carried an edge of vulnerability that made his chest tighten. "Daniel, we need to meet at Dr. Carter's clinic," she said. "It's about Isaac. There's something you need to know." Daniel's immediate response was resistance, but curiosity and guilt gnawed at him. Against his better judgment, he agreed. "Fine," he said. "I'll be there." The next afternoon, the two of them found themselves sitting awkwardly across from each other in Dr. Carter's office. Rachel held Isaac close, her expression guarded, while Daniel avoided her gaze, his hands fidgeting nervously. Dr. Carter entered, carrying a file that seemed to weigh heavier than its physical form. She looked between them, her face serious but kind. "Thank you both for coming," she began. "Before I explain the results, I want to emphasize that this is a medical discovery, not a reflection of anyone's actions or choices." Daniel frowned, finally meeting Rachel's eyes for a brief moment before looking back at Dr. Carter. "What does that mean?" Dr. Carter opened the file and placed a sheet on the desk. "Isaac's DNA does confirm, without question, that he is biologically your son, Daniel," she said. Rachel felt a wave of relief wash over her, though the tension in the room remained thick. "But," Dr. Carter continued, "Isaac carries a rare genetic marker that's commonly found in individuals of African descent. This is why his complexion is darker than yours, Daniel. It's a recessive trait that can skip generations." Rachel's breath caught. "Recessive? From where?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Carter nodded. "It means that somewhere in one of your family trees, Daniel, there's ancestry that includes African heritage. It may be distant, but it's significant enough to have influenced Isaac's appearance." Daniel blinked, stunned. "That's not possible," he said, his voice shaky. "My family, we've never—" Dr. Carter gently interrupted him. "Genetics don't lie, Daniel. It's not uncommon for family histories to have missing pieces, especially when it comes to lineage from generations past. This isn't about blame or identity. It's about understanding the truth." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Daniel's mind reeled. The very foundation of his identity had been shaken, and he didn't know how to process it. He glanced at Rachel, whose tear-filled eyes were fixed on him, pleading for him to understand. This doesn't make sense," he finally muttered. "I didn't know." Rachel's voice broke through the silence. "None of this changes the fact that Isaac is our son, Daniel. He's ours. And he needs us." Daniel looked down at Isaac, who gazed back at him with wide, innocent eyes. The weight of his actions, the abandonment, the doubts, the accusations, came crashing down on him. He felt a knot tighten in his chest, a mix of shame and regret that was almost unbearable. Daniel started, his voice breaking. I didn't know. I didn't know what to think, Rachel. I was so scared. So angry. Rachel's tears flowed freely now. "Do you see him, Daniel? Do you see our son? He's perfect. He's a part of both of us, no matter what his skin looks like." Dr. Carter watched the exchange quietly, giving them space to process the revelation. Daniel reached out hesitantly, his hand trembling as he touched Isaac's tiny fingers. The baby cooed softly, oblivious to the turmoil surrounding him. Outside the clinic, as they walked to their separate cars, Daniel stopped Rachel. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, his voice raw, "but I want to try. I want to be there for Isaac, for you." Rachel looked at him, her face a mixture of pain and hope. "You left us, Daniel. It's not something I can forgive overnight. But if you're willing to take responsibility and be the father Isaac deserves, we can start there." Daniel nodded, his expression solemn. "I'll prove it to you, Rachel. I promise." The days that followed were filled with tension and fragile hope. Rachel agreed to let Daniel visit Isaac, but the visits were on her terms, always supervised and always cautious. For Daniel, each visit was both a gift and a reminder of what he had nearly lost. One evening, as Daniel sat on Rachel's couch with Isaac in his arms, Rachel quietly observed from across the room. The baby cooed and reached for Daniel's face, his tiny hands brushing against Daniel's cheeks. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to fully embrace the bond he had once doubted. "Rachel," Daniel said softly, breaking the silence, "I don't even know how to begin apologizing to you. What I did, walking away like that, it was unforgivable." Rachel crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "You can't undo what you did, Daniel. But you can show Isaac that you're willing to be the father he deserves. Words mean nothing without actions." Her words hit Daniel like a blow, but he nodded. "You're right," he said. "I don't expect you to trust me right away, but I'm going to prove to both of you that I'm here to stay." Over the next few weeks, Daniel threw himself into being present. He attended every doctor's appointment, brought groceries to Rachel's house, and even started reading books about parenting. Rachel remained guarded, but she couldn't deny that Daniel was making an effort. One day, as Rachel watched Daniel feed Isaac a bottle, she noticed a change in his demeanor. The arrogance and defensiveness that had once defined him were gone, replaced by humility and quiet determination. For the first time in months, Rachel allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Despite Daniel's efforts, the wounds of the past weren't easy to heal. One evening, as they sat together after Isaac had fallen asleep, Rachel finally voiced the pain that had been festering inside her. "You didn't just leave me, Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. "You left your son. You let your fears and assumptions cloud everything, and you chose to run instead of facing the truth." Daniel looked down, his hands clasped tightly. "I know," he admitted. "I was so consumed by what other people might think, by what it said about me, that I didn't stop to think about what it meant for you and Isaac. I let my pride and my fear take over." Rachel wiped away a tear. "It wasn't just pride, Daniel. It was prejudice, and that's what hurts the most." Daniel's chest tightened. Hearing the word spoken aloud was like a slap in the face, but he knew Rachel was right. "I grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than anything," he said quietly. "I was taught to see the world in a certain way, and I never questioned it, until now. Isaac has opened my eyes to so much, Rachel. I don't want to be the man I was before." Rachel studied him for a long moment. "If you truly mean that, Daniel, then you have to do more than just show up. You have to confront the biases that made you walk away in the first place. That's the only way we can move forward." Determined to change, Daniel began attending counseling sessions and diversity workshops. He wanted to understand the prejudices he had absorbed over the years and unlearn them for Isaac's sake. At first, the process was uncomfortable and humbling, but Daniel persisted. Each session peeled back another layer of ignorance, forcing him to confront the flaws in his worldview. He also took steps to repair his relationship with Rachel. He listened more, spoke less, and worked to rebuild her trust, brick by brick. Their relationship remained strained, but the moments of connection between them grew more frequent. One afternoon, Daniel invited Rachel and Isaac to a small park near his apartment. As they sat on a blanket under a tree, watching Isaac play with a toy, Daniel turned to Rachel. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, that I need to do more than just show up." Rachel raised an eyebrow, curious. "And?" Daniel took a deep breath. "I've been researching ways to support families who've experienced situations like ours, families who've faced judgment or discrimination because of their differences. I want to create a foundation in Isaac's name, something that helps educate people and provides resources for parents and children." Rachel's eyes widened, her guarded expression softening. "You're serious?" Daniel nodded. "I don't just want to be a better father to Isaac. I want to make sure that he grows up in a world that sees him for who he is, not what he looks like." Rachel's lips curved into a small smile. "That's a start, Daniel." Months turned into a year, and the once broken family began to piece itself back together. Daniel's commitment to changing wasn't just words, it was reflected in his actions every single day. He became a hands-on father, changing diapers, singing lullabies, and showing up for every milestone Isaac reached. More importantly, he embraced the responsibility of educating himself and others about the biases that had nearly destroyed his family. The foundation he started in Isaac's name quickly gained traction. It provided workshops, counseling, and resources to families dealing with prejudice or strained relationships due to cultural misunderstandings. Daniel often spoke at events, sharing his story with raw honesty. He never sugarcoated the pain he caused or the ignorance he had harbored. Instead, he used his experiences as a cautionary tale, a lesson in accountability and the power of change. One evening, as the three of them sat on the living room floor playing with Isaac, Rachel glanced at Daniel. His laugh was genuine, his smile brighter than she'd ever seen. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could heal completely. "Daniel," Rachel said, breaking the peaceful silence, "I see how hard you've worked, how much you've grown. I want you to know, I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Daniel looked at her, his eyes glistening. "That means everything to me, Rachel, but I'll never stop trying to earn back your trust." Rachel nodded, her own emotions threatening to spill over. "You've already started." The community also noticed the changes in Daniel. The same neighbors who had once gossiped and whispered behind Rachel's back now approached her with apologies and kind words. Some admitted their own biases, inspired by Daniel's public reckoning. Rachel never sought their validation, but seeing attitudes shift gave her hope for Isaac's future. One particularly bright day, the family attended a community event hosted by Daniel's foundation. Children of all backgrounds played together, their laughter filling the air. Parents exchanged stories, finding common ground in their struggles and triumphs. At the center of it all was Isaac, toddling around with a wide smile, his chubby hands reaching for balloons. A reporter approached Rachel and Daniel, microphone in hand. "You've become an inspiration to so many families," the reporter said. "What message do you hope your story sends?" Rachel exchanged a glance with Daniel before answering. "That love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice," she said. "And sometimes, the hardest part of love is unlearning what we've been taught to believe. But when we choose to see people for who they truly are, not what we expect them to be, that's when real change happens." Daniel nodded, adding, "I learned the hard way that love requires humility and courage. I hope our story shows that it's never too late to grow, to make amends, and to fight for what truly matters." As the sun set on the event, Rachel, Daniel, and Isaac stood together, watching the vibrant sky. For the first time in what felt like forever, Rachel felt a sense of peace. They weren't a perfect family. There were still scars and struggles, but they were a family, and that was enough. Daniel placed a hand on Rachel's shoulder, his voice soft. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." Rachel looked up at him, her expression a mix of gratitude and resolve. "Thank you for becoming the man Isaac and I deserve." Isaac giggled, holding onto both of their hands as he tried to take a wobbly step forward. In that moment, under the warm glow of the setting sun, the three of them stood together, a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the power of love to bridge even the deepest divides. The story concludes with a message of redemption and hope, emphasizing the importance of accountability, forgiveness, and personal growth. The journey of Rachel and Daniel highlights the complexities of love and family, leaving the audience with an emotional yet uplifting resolution.